Welcome into the install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. That's the main man, Greg. He's wearing his red because Indiana got a win in basketball
Oh,
last
they did. I
night.
watched a little of that last night too.
Yeah, had to survive the mighty what is it, SIU Edwardsville. I'm
Yeah,
not
they
sure what
did.
the mascot is, but nice
And
19-point win, Greg, for the boys. Lovely to see them getting back in the
it
action
was good
of
to
college
see
basketball.
the freshman who stayed back for his sophomore year, and because he was a huge recruit, as you know. So last year was a little disappointing, and hopefully that's the beginning of a really good season.
Yeah, big night for Mackenzie and
Cabo.
Baco, who, of course,
Yeah.
the audience is here to hear all about.
Yeah, yeah. They want to hear about Indiana basketball for
Now, they
sure. That's
might want to hear about Indiana football, depending on what their
how
draft.
about that? How about that?
I'm plotting my travel plans, Greg, because the Titans are at the Colts that sat the Sunday after the Saturday first round college football playoff game, which might be Tennessee hosting Indiana.
Now, let me ask you a question. And then we'll get to the real reason we're doing this. Are they the second highest scoring team in the country behind Miami?
Yeah,
I
they're
know they
right up there. Boise
I know they've
State's
scored
third.
40 points literally in every game.
Yeah, it's been crazy. The best win that they have is Nebraska, and you can debate the quality of that, but still, they've got a big game home with Michigan this weekend, and then at Ohio State after a bye. So they could do okay here down the stretch.
Yeah, really they just have to win one of them, really. I mean, you want to win both, but they really just have to win one.
Crazy times. Anyway,
Yep.
crazy times for the
Well,
Titans to get a win. That's a rare enough thing for us.
yeah, well, like I said, they're starting their Super Bowl run now with the win against New England.
Oh, the path to 11-6, baby. It began
Yeah, that's
on
right.
Sunday. Yes,
That's
indeed.
right.
Well, but you have to have something to build upon, and they've been looking for that for a while. And Greg, you and I were just talking offline about the offensive line and how they survived, if not kind of thrived in this situation, despite some changing pieces and parts.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly that, and obviously Levis started the year at quarterback. Now you have Rudolph, but they're obviously a running football team. And, we talked even in the offseason, we talked about Pollard when they signed him, and I said, he's a really good back. And, one of the things to keep in mind, the last 5 weeks, okay, Pollard's had 22, 17, 16, 20, and 28 carries. He's fourth in carries the last 5 weeks, but you have to take away one of the backs, Henry. And so the backs who've played 5 games in the last 5 weeks, Kareem Hunt and Kyron Williams are the only two ahead of him who've played 5 games in terms of carries. So Pollard is clearly the foundation and the starting point of their offense. And I got to tell you, I thought their O-line played well this week. And it's still the NFL, and so you can't say, well, it's the Patriots. The Patriots have been pretty competitive in most of their games. Their defense is a lot of the same players who were there last year when they were very, very good. Um, I thought their O-line was good. It's a shame what happened to Cushenberry. Levin came in. Brunskill started at right guard, and I thought he did well. They had the rotation at right tackle. I thought this was Latham's best game. Again, I'm not charting. I don't know what Bill Callahan would say, but I thought just watching without charting every snap, I thought he played really well. And they were, by the way, they were very good in pass protection as well. I mean, there was only one sack. It came I think first quarter maybe or second quarter where Wise ran around Watson. But other than that, I thought the protection was pretty good throughout the game. I mean, this was a solid performance by the O-line.
Which is, again, we're looking for things that they can build upon moving forward, and
Yep.
we'll see what changes because potentially Levis may be back in the lineup this week against the Chargers. So how much that affects how well the offensive line is able to hold up in protection, how much longer the quarterback is or is not holding the ball, things like
Great
that
point. Great
do
point.
factor in because I do think that's been Mason Rudolph is not perfect, but he is at least quick with it. He gets it out quickly in these situations, and he's missing some stuff on the field too, as I'm sure you saw. But to your point about Pollard, 128 yards on those 28 carries, still averaging 4.6 yards per carry. And, Brian Callahan joked, Greg, this week that he may never have to practice again because he didn't practice at all last week ahead of that game because he's also dealing with a foot injury.
Well, it's funny you say that because two traits continue to stand out for me with Pollard. Again, because I watch this every week, obviously. He's an excellent cutback runner, and he has shown the balance and body control to work through small creases at the point of attack. And those two things to me really stand out when you watch him. And you wouldn't necessarily call him a power back, but he's not a scat back. He does get some hard yards when he runs inside, but he is a really, really good cutback runner, and we see that consistently on his runs, particularly on his own runs. He had the great cutback, I think, on his 32-yarder very early in the game, which was a pin pull concept where they went outside. Latham was the puller. And I think the tight end, Okwankwo, was the sealer or the pinner, and he had a great cutback. But he's a really good cutback runner. He runs with patience and vision.
I hate that he had a touchdown wiped off the board. I think Wiley got a holding call where he had another really nice cutback
Yeah.
situation where he was able to find the end zone, but of course that was negated by penalty. Just quickly on Latham, Greg,
Yeah,
where are you? What do you like most about what you're seeing from him right now? Because he's not just playing well for a rookie left tackle; he's playing well for a left tackle in the league.
I would agree. And I think one of the things that has stood out to me, which he struggled with early on, and it may have just been him getting used to the higher level competition, is I think in pass pro, you're starting to see the anchor strength. Because that was a real deal when he came out of Alabama, that this kid is super strong. But sometimes that's also a function, Buck, of technique and fundamentals. And I think early on, he might have just tried to rely purely on the strength. And in the NFL, that's not enough. It's a good starting point, obviously, but you're facing, the best of the best when it comes to pass rushers on the edge. And I'm noticing he's getting better at just the anchor part of pass protection because he was pushed back early in the season, which was surprising because the guy just as a specimen is incredibly strong. But if there's no technique that goes with that, you're still going to get pushed back.
Yeah, absolutely. So, their opponent this week is the Chargers on the road. They
Yep.
are winners of three of their last four, Greg. I want to ask you, because obviously Jim Harbaugh comes in, he brings over Greg Roman, who of course they have familiarity with. Let's start with the offensive side of the ball. This is
Yeah.
also a running football team, obviously. Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman are out there to try and kick somebody's ass.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because for those who remember, who are listening, that remember Greg Roman with the Ravens, and of course the Ravens still do this, but they used Patrick Ricard. I'm sure people remember that name. He still plays for them. They used Patrick Ricard essentially as kind of a fullback tight end, and he played 40% of their snaps basically, and he obviously he's not really a receiver. So even though he's technically an eligible receiver, he played as a run blocker in a run first offense. So now that Greg Roman is with the Chargers, he's doing the same thing. They have a player named Scott Matlock, I believe it is, who was a Mountain West all defensive tackle for a couple of years, I believe, at Boise State. And they made him the Patrick Ricard of their offense. They play him. He's played about 20 snaps per game on offense. They move him around. Obviously, he's a run blocker. He's not a receiver, but they run the ball, and that's what he is. But they also line up a good amount in 11 personnel because Justin Herbert's as good a thrower as there is in the league. And other than maybe Lad McConkey, well, they have Josh Palmer, who people know from his days at Tennessee. And then they're playing Quentin Johnston. They've got Jalen Reagor. Those are their four receivers right now. And their offense, it's not probably not one of the best in the league, but it's not an easy offense to play against.
Yeah, certainly physicality is what they pride themselves on. And
For
J.K.
sure.
Dobbins, I know it's kind of not, I don't want to say faded. He's not playing as well as he was at the start of the year. Obviously, it's a long NFL season. We've just now reached the halfway point, but still, it's good to see J.K. Dobbins perform
Yep.
at a high level. He had 14 carries, 85 yards, two touchdowns in this game. And the other part of that you mentioned is Quentin Johnston, Greg, the second-year receiver out of TCU. He seems like at least starting to become more consistent as a receiver. That was a struggle for him, specifically with the drops in his rookie year.
Yes, and he has to play now because of the injuries and the changes. So he gets a lot of snaps. And the thing that immediately stands out, he can run. I mean, he's not a complete receiver, and he may never be. We don't know what the future holds, but there's no question that he can run, and he's long. So you have to be aware of that because he's 6'3" with speed and stride length, and therefore he presents a vertical dimension on any given play. And Palmer, I've always liked Josh Palmer, right when he came out of Tennessee.
Yep.
Um, yeah, again, I'm not there, so I don't know what the situation is, but he's a talented guy. I'm sure you remember him. I remember watching him his last year, and one of the reasons I don't want to say one of the reasons I liked him, but one game that stood out was he ran by Patrick Surtain a couple of times when they played Alabama. You probably remember that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and, he's another guy. He's big and he can run. And then McConkey's just a really good receiver. Just, I mean, he knows how to be a receiver. Um, and by the way, he's not small and he can run too. So, I mean, he doesn't play as a true vertical guy where you go, oh my God, he's just going to run by you, but he's not slow by any means. So their receiving core is kind of interesting. And like I said, they play with the Matlock kid, so they're going to line up and run the ball. So they have a pretty multi-dimensional offense. They play the rookie right tackle Alt, who's been up and down this year, which I expected. Um, Slater had a tough time last week, the left tackle, but he had a tough time with a guy who's pretty good in Miles Garrett. So I don't want to sit here and say Slater's not a good player because he had a tough time on certain reps against Miles Garrett.
Yeah, Miles Garrett is a different caliber of player, even in a
Yes.
league chock full of really, really high level defensive ends. Um,
Yep.
quickly to Justin Herbert, I wonder how much their change in offensive philosophy from what they were running previously in Herbert's career to now under Harbaugh and Roman, how much that's helped him be efficient within the concept of their scheme, Greg.
He's been very efficient this year, and last week he was outstanding on
Yeah.
third down, which of course is what you want your quarterback to be all the time if you can. Um, you know, when I watch their offense, one thing that again, this is never a rip on coaches. I don't do that, but I was just surprised studying their offense that they don't do more conventional play action, meaning the quarterback under center, out of that 21 personnel package with Matlock, who's the fullback type on the field. They did do a little of it, not as much as I would expect. Maybe they were going to work more toward that because obviously, when you put Matlock on the field, you probably have a pretty good idea what you're going to get from the defense, both in terms of personnel and how they align. And I think it really sets up well for run action. So maybe they'll get to it. Last week they had two really good plays out of it, both to McConkey on first and 10, 19 yards and 20 yards. So I think look, to me, Herbert, and I know a lot of people because he hasn't quote unquote played in big games yet and all that. But I mean, just talent wise, I don't think you'd find a coach or a GM in this league that wouldn't tell you that in terms of pure physical traits, he's not top five. He's top five.
Yeah, it was fun to talk to the Titans defensive lineman Sebastian Joseph Day, who was obviously with the Chargers, who was the team
Yep.
captain there, knows Herbert well, had really, really glowing things to say about what it is that Herbert has been able to do and how difficult it is to defend a guy like that,
Oh
certainly.
yeah.
Those
And,
high.
and and he ran a bit this week when he had to. And I think sometimes we lose sight of how athletic he is and how big he is. I've been able to stand next to him in my career. And sometimes with these quarterbacks, when a guy's big, it's like, oh my God. And I mean, Herbert's like 6'5", 235. He is a big man.
Full-sized for sure.
Yeah.
The Chargers defense, Kevin Minter comes over from Michigan. There's a lot of former Titans on this defense, whether it be Christian Fulton or Elijah Molden, Tier Tart, Bud Dupree. They've got these guys playing at a reasonably high level, Greg, and I wonder what you make of specifically their secondary, because it seems
Yeah.
for Fulton in particular, he's having, at least when you look at some of the numbers, I don't know what your tape study would tell you as far as how good he's been relative to what they're asking him to do this year.
I think don't forget, I think they're the number one defense in the league in terms of points allowed.
They are.
So, I mean, this defense has played well. And the secondary has played well. Look, we knew, and it ultimately didn't work out in Tennessee or they would have signed him, but because everybody needs corners, as you know. So, I mean, if they loved him, they would have signed him. But he was a second round pick, and that was on merit. It's not like we're dealing with a free agent. He came out of a big time college program as a second round pick, and he's got talent. You know that, Buck. I
Yeah.
mean, he was there for a couple of years. The talent's not the issue. I know he got hurt a bit. Obviously, things became a little dysfunctional here and there, as you know way better than I do. But he's a good player, and he's had a nice year. And Molden, I don't know if you remember, but when he was drafted, I always liked Molden. The
No, I
issue was
remember.
Yeah, the issue is finding out where he plays best in the league. Because in college he was sort of a Mr. Do-it-all, but obviously that doesn't happen really that much in the NFL. Some people think it does. Oh, this guy can play five positions. Well, no, it doesn't really work that way in the league. So I think, now he's playing safety. And that may be his best position, but he's always been a swagger guy. He's always brought like a little bit of a tempo to a defense. And he's played well. They're a good defense. They don't blitz a ton. They play a lot of zone coverage. That's their thing. They do not play a lot of man. They're a heavy zone coverage defense.
Yeah. Not to nitpick what the Titans defense has done this year, but I do
They're
think.
really good, by the way. They're the second best third down defense in the league. They are really good on defense.
And Jeff finally had a game where he looked like the best version of Jeff Simmons, Greg, in this game. And they even had to move Michael Wenu inside to guard to try and keep Jeff from continuing to affect the inside of that pocket. But the only thing I would bring up in relation to Molden is they traded Elijah Molden away for the sake of Jamal Adams, and that is probably something that they are regretting at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, these things happen. Look, Molden was not, from the Texans' perspective, he was not truly a starter and a big time guy. But hey, go to another team, things change. He's got the ability to play in this league and be a quality player, Molden. But it's funny talking about the Titans D. Uh, you know, it's a really good D. I mean, they did some really good things this week. People can say it's the Patriots. Those things don't matter to me. It's I look to see what a team does tactically. I really loved what they did with that blitz stunt concept where they took either Gibbons or Murray and had him basically run at a guard, and then have a loop behind him. Every time they did that, there was a clean path for the loop, or whether it was Simmons, whether it was Key, however they did it, it just worked really well. I just think they've got a really nice defense. And the thing is I think that Wilson's doing a really good job in terms of, look, I think he wants to be aggressive and I think he wants to play man, but I think that he's understanding what his talent is, and they're not playing a ton of man. They play man, but it's not like, oh, this is a man pressure defense. I think he's playing to what his personnel is.
Yeah, and certainly that's been impacted specifically with the two outside corners missing as much time
Yeah, I mean,
as
you
they
got to
have.
play to your personnel. You can't
Yeah,
give up big plays. You can't in the passing game.
no,
And I
and,
know they
and
just signed. I know they just signed Mike Edwards probably because Diggs is out.
mhm.
Edwards. It just never worked in Buffalo because he was hurt and he never got a chance to really. He didn't go through training camp and it just didn't work. But I always thought Mike Edwards was a pretty good player, and you probably remember him going back because he came out of Kentucky, so he was in the SEC, and I always liked his game. And when he was with the Chiefs for the last couple of years, he was an important part of their defense. Um, and again, he's probably not. I don't know whether he's playing this week or if he's ready to play. I don't know any of that, because I don't know his physical condition or what the situation is. But he's not a bad football player.
No, I expect they'll get him on the field in some form or fashion, Greg, but it's going to be a lot of Mike Brown, the backup safety for
Yeah,
the.
who was fine last week. I mean, look, we know that the Patriots don't put out the best wide receivers in the league, so I'm not going to sit here and say, man, unbelievable performance, because they're not playing, the quality of receivers they'll play against this week, and a passing game, that they'll get this week when they played a rookie in Drake May. Not that May was bad, but obviously it's a rookie quarterback. Um, and so we'll see. But I mean, Edwards, I've always felt that Edwards was good enough to be a starting player in the league.
Absolutely. NFL matchup show, of course, is how you can get ready for the rest of the NFL slate in Week 10. A fun game that I know made the matchup. Well, quickly before we talk about this, Greg, was there this is our first show pre or post trade deadline.
Oh yeah.
Was there a player to a team that you particularly liked? I know when guys get traded, they're not necessarily a core part of the teams that they're leaving, but I didn't know if there was one guy at the trade deadline that you saw get moved to another team that particularly struck your interest.
I would say Marshawn Lattimore going to Washington because Washington's a team that's clearly right in it. They're 7-2. They're a division leader, and they were struggling at corner. I mean, they have Benjamin St-Juste, who's a quality NFL corner, but they were really uncertain as to the other corner position. Emmanuel Forbes has turned out not to be what everybody hoped he might be when he's a first round pick. Um, so what they've been doing is they've been playing Sainristil, the rookie from Michigan, at outside corner. Okay, now he played outside corner at times in Michigan quite a bit, but he's not an outside corner really in the NFL. But they played him there because they didn't really have another one. So now he can move back inside where he's better suited as an NFL player, and now they've got Lattimore on the outside. So, and Lattimore's a dog. I mean, there was a 2, 3 year stretch where Lattimore was arguably the best corner in the league. Now he's been hurt a lot, and but he's not old. So, assuming I'm not going to sit here and say let's assume Lattimore at his absolute best. We don't know that, but the fact is he's a good player and he's a dog and he's a swagger guy and he's an upgrade. And now they've got two corners who are big physical outside corners, and that to me, I think that really impacts in a positive way their defense.
And it's a great game on the slate this weekend because they host
Yeah,
the Pittsburgh Steelers, who also
who
acquired
just got Mike Williams.
at the trade deadline. Mike Williams on offense, Preston Smith on defense. Greg, I'm not sure if you have a piece on that game specifically, but I know it made the matchup show.
It made the matchup show. I'm not doing that piece. Darius Butler is, but and he's actually taking a look at Jaden Daniels. We were going to almost do that game as a full segment game, but there are some other games that we just felt had to be in the show. But
Sure.
that's a really big game this week. The Steelers have settled in to an interesting team. Obviously, we know their defense is good, and they just added a great piece to it. But offensively, they've settled in with Russell Wilson, kind of playing in many ways like they did when he was with Seattle, where run game, because Najee Harris has had 19 plus carries in the two games Wilson has started, over 100 yards in each game. Wilson is a really good deep ball thrower, so they push it down the field at times. Now they have Williams added to that, added to Pickens and Austin, who can run. Austin came out of Memphis. He was a track guy. He's a sub 4.4 guy. So they've got a lot of speed. So they can, they'll work Wilson on the boot game, on the vertical passing game, and they'll run the ball. And in that offense, if you convert on third downs, then you've got a good offense.
Yeah, absolutely. So what piece would you like people to focus on this week that you're particularly highlighting, Greg? Because there are some fun games across the NFL this
Well,
weekend.
the Monday night game's Dolphin Rams, and while the Dolphins are 2-7, now that two is back, they're certainly a more competitive team. But the
Certainly.
Rams, I'm telling you, and people wouldn't know this. I had to research it. I mean, I watch and you notice things, but until I then dug in, the Rams have really changed their defense over the last 3 weeks. They are a heavy dime defense. They've played about 25 snaps of dime, six defensive backs per game in the last three games. They're the number one third down defense in the league over the last three games. They do a lot of stuff out of dime, and their D line now is a young, explosive D line with Verse and Young from Tennessee on the edges. And inside Braden Fisk and Kobe Turner, they are athletic and explosive. This is going to be an interesting defense to keep an eye on down the stretch.
Absolutely. Well, we'll look forward to seeing what you guys have to say about it on the NFL Matchup Show this weekend. You can set your DVRs or get it on demand. Of course, you can catch it on ESPN as well. Greg, I'm off to LA. It's kind of gloomy, feeling a little more like November here in Middle Tennessee. So a trip to LA this time of year, very
Well,
nice.
there you go.
Love to
There
see
you
it.
go. You're
More
going to get
Indiana basketball talk next time we do the podcast, I'm
are you
sure.
going to get a star on the walk there when you're out there?
Me, not unless I graffiti my name over somebody who I think is less deserving than I am. But
Well, there you go. There you go.
I like to take matters into my own hands, man.
Right, right, right.
Always good to see you, buddy. Thanks for the
All
time
right.
and
Thanks,
enjoy the
Buck.
games this weekend.
Thanks.